guys. So I just did a live over on my Facebook page, but I'm gonna pop in here. Let's let that sink in for a second. This is not clickbait. They think that I might be pregnant again. They said if they took my last miscarriage out of the equation, they assume that I'm about 3.5 to 4 weeks along. Y'all, I miscarried 2.5 weeks ago. So this math is not even making sense. And so I'm going to kind of unpack this a little bit and just kind of share my journey, what's been going on. And this is all, everything that I'm going to share with you has been confirmed via lab works, ultrasounds, the whole shebang. So just to give you a little bit of a backstory here. So in March, April, we got pregnant the first time, and it was what they more termed a very, very early miscarriage. I was probably 4.5 weeks along, maybe a little less than that, but like a chemical pregnancy. Okay. So something didn't take, just didn't take or implant correctly. And so I was pregnant. It wasn't confirmed on ultrasound, but I took positive pregnancy tests, and then my period was a little bit late. And then I think that's just when I miscarried, right? So they say that a lot of people wouldn't even know if it was that early. So that was the first one. The second one, we got pregnant in May, and I knew the exact date that we got pregnant because it was just like, I just knew, okay? So I knew that I was 6 weeks along, and I thought on about June 8th that I started to have some spotting, some bleeding, some cramping, and I miscarried years ago, and I just kind of knew, you guys. I was just kind of like, oh, I don't feel good about this. So I did. So they wanted me to come in, and they wanted to do an ultrasound just to check, okay? So, cool. Sorry, I just got paid. My affiliate income just hit. So anyways, which is always nice, just to have money hit your bank when you're doing things or sleeping or whatever. Anywho, so they did an ultrasound, and they confirmed on June 10th that I was 6 weeks along. Well, they estimated from the ultrasound 5 weeks and 3 days to 5 weeks and 6 days. Okay. So that was right on par. I should have been 6 weeks along, but even the ultrasound confirmed that's how far along I was. There was a gestational sac, only one baby in there, but my hCG was really low. It was at 120. 120 is at like the lowest end of normal. It wasn't good. I didn't feel good about it. It was super low. Okay. So I knew. Well, later that day after the ultrasound, so I had already been spotting for 2 days. Later that day, the bleeding started to get worse. And then the next morning, I knew in my heart, I had a complete miscarriage. I knew that because I just, there's that little sac thing, and I just knew. Like there was a little tiny thing in there. I'm like, I knew. Okay. So after that, I was like, okay, now I'm just tired. My body's getting back to normal. But then what happened was over the last couple of weeks, I've just been feeling really off. I've been exhausted. I don't know if you're new here or if you follow me at all, but I have been overcoming some health stuff naturally for the past couple of years. And so I didn't know if I was having like a health flare up or really what was going on, like some autoimmune type stuff. We'll talk about that in a different video. So anyways, I was just off. My hair is crazy. I was out in the rain, and so it's like it dried really funny. So I felt like, oh my gosh, like something is going wrong. I don't know what's going on. So today's Monday, I ended up in the emergency room on Thursday night, early Friday morning. So between 1 a.m. and 4:30 a.m., my husband and I were in the emergency room because something was not right in my body. They discovered that I had a UTI, which I felt like was really weird because the only time in the past few years that I've had a UTI was when I was pregnant. So I was like, well, that's weird, first of all. And that's because the hormones throw your body's balance off. And so like it's just off. And so I thought that that was weird. Well, then the doctor comes back in and he said, by the way, did you know that you're pregnant? And I was immediately like, oh, it's just leftover hCG in my system from the miscarriage. I said, no, I was pregnant, but I miscarried 2.5 weeks ago. And then he asked how far along I was. And I said, well, I was only, 6 weeks along. He's like, And he's like, that's really weird. So they went ahead and they checked the level of hCG in my blood, right? So they wanted to see how much was actually in there, because their thought process was maybe there's some like residual miscarriage tissue that's creating and making you feel so tired and sick and just creating some problems. And that could be really bad because you can actually get a septic, from a miscarriage. I was like, oh my gosh. So he goes back and he checks my levels and he comes back and he's like, that's really weird because your levels are at 356. So here's the thing. On June 10th, the day of my ultrasound, my levels were at 120. I had what I thought was a complete miscarriage. And now, 2.5 weeks later, my levels are at 356. So they were thinking maybe there's some part of tissue that's retained that your body's like still trying to grow as a baby. So they wanted to schedule me for an emergency D&C. But before they did that, they wanted to put me through to an emergency ultrasound just to see what was going on in there. Because if there was something in there, creating that hormone, it would be big enough to pick up. So we went into the ultrasound Friday afternoon. I went home, I slept, and so we woke up and my husband and I went to the ultrasound. So we get there and they do the ultrasound, and so the tech, by the way, was the same one that I had a couple weeks ago. And there was nothing in there, you guys. There was no tissue. They said it was a complete miscarriage. There was nothing going on in my ovaries. They checked my fallopian tubes, my uterus, my ovaries, nothing. No ectopic pregnancy, no molar pregnancy, nothing that they could see, no blighted ovum, like nothing. There's nothing in there. So they're super confused then, because now by this point, later in the afternoon, my hCG had gone from 356 to nearly 400. So this was just a few, hours later. And they found that really odd. And so instead of doing a D&C, they said, if we didn't know better and we took your previous miscarriage out of the equation, we would assume that you're about 3.5 to 4 weeks along. You guys, I had only miscarried 2.5 weeks prior. So the math here is not adding up, okay? But they didn't want to do a D&C just in case I'm re-pregnant. So anyways, so they redrew my levels this morning, and now we're waiting on those results just to see what's going on. And they're also going to draw my levels again on Wednesday, because if they've continued to increase, then I'm re-pregnant. Now, they also said that, hCG is in your blood and blood tests are more sensitive. So why don't you pick up a test and see if the urine ones picked it up? Well, I found one of these in my drawer, and this is the brand I like the least out of all the pregnancy ones, because I feel like it's not as sensitive. It's just, in my opinion, not as sensitive. So anyways, so I went ahead and took this. It's been 3 weeks since my miscarriage started. Yeah. So starting today, now it's been 3 weeks since my miscarriage. And my hCG on June 10th was at 120. So and this line showed up right away. Like it didn't it goes, whoop, it didn't even get up to this part, and this line had already shown. It was just like super there. So they think I might be pregnant again, which is crazy, because here's what they think might have happened. They're saying that given the timeline of all of this, that I must have ovulated. And because, you guys, we were not trying for another baby. It's not like we were like, oh, we just miscarried, let's try again. No, because I know that you can ovulate 2 weeks after you have a miscarriage, but that would mean that I would have just ovulated, okay? So I'm my hCG levels are far too high for me to have only ovulated 2 weeks after. I literally must have ovulated like right at the same time that I was miscarrying, possibly even before. That's what they're thinking, which is like blowing my mind. And they were like, I don't want to say it's impossible, but it would be like a miracle and just highly unlikely / highly improbable. But it's just crazy to me that I could. So here's what could have happened is my body might have known that it was going to miscarry. So it ovulated right before I started to miscarry. And then technically I could have still gotten pregnant. And then while I was miscarrying, and then that egg was making its journey down the tubes and then implanted right after the miscarriage. So technically, if I'm pregnant right now, they're thinking that this pregnancy technically would have started before the last one even ended, which is really, really hard for me to wrap my head around. I'm feeling all kinds of emotions because obviously at this point, we don't really know. You guys, we don't know what's going on. I'm kind of excited, and I kind of feel like in my gut, like this has to be pregnancy, right? Like, because I don't think, and I kept asking the doctor, I was like, would my hCG rise if there was no tissue? And they're like, no, it wouldn't, because that's only a pregnancy hormone. And then I should not have Googled where hCG can come from without pregnancy. But like my husband said, he's like, if you had hCG that was high and there was something going weird, he's like, then your hCG in the last pregnancy was just 2.5 weeks ago, wouldn't have been low. So it almost feels like I have to be pregnant. And then the craziest thing that she said was, so when they tested my levels on, so they tested my levels on the 26th, I miscarried on the 10th. That's a 16-day difference, okay? So even if I had any leftover residual hCG, that would be like 16 days after ovulation. Do you see where my hCG are still a little high? So even she was like, even if you are 3.5 weeks along, which is still quite early, she's like, your hCG is still a little bit high for just a singleton pregnancy. And my jaw was like, ah! Like, what? That would be the ultimate crazy. But then again, we won't know more until later today. That's just kind of where we're at. I don't know, you guys. I don't know what to think. I don't know. Like, I'm having a really hard time not getting excited. I feel excited, but then my brain automatically wants to like shut it down so that I don't get disappointed. If it comes back, my levels are declining, then there was just some kind of, for some reason, hCG was just going up in my bloodstream for some reason. And I'm not pregnant. I guess that would kind of be a bummer at this point. I would be kind of disappointed. So I don't really know. I don't know what to think. I don't know. I really don't. So we'll know more this afternoon when I get the test results back to see what my hCG levels were at. So I will keep you posted. I will post that in another video. So if you're following, I will probably title this, I don't know where I'll put this video, but you'll see it on my channel for sure. Okay. So if you want to know what happens in this whole crazy, am I pregnant 2.5 weeks after a miscarriage? I'll keep you posted. But it would be kind of crazy though. We saw 2 double rainbows in the past 2 weeks. Yeah, it was kind of crazy. So if you follow me on Instagram, you saw that. It was just insane. Like, I have not seen a double rainbow in a long time. And literally the day after our miscarriage, or it was the night of my miscarriage, the night of my miscarriage. So that morning I knew that I had like miscarried, right? And that night it rained kind of on and off all day. And then that night it was like glowing orange. And we saw the most beautiful, bright rainbow I've ever seen in my life. And it was a double rainbow. It was so gorgeous. And I felt like that day that it was just kind of like a sign, like, hey, it's okay. It's going to be fine. Cause they say like rainbow babies and stuff. So the whole thing would just be cool. And at this point I'm having a hard time not getting excited. Cause I was like, what if I am pregnant again? Ooh. I don't know, you guys. So I'll keep you posted.